And for those of you who come here each year to encourage us, who are members of this place, who come from Australia's community of faith, we thank you. This can be a rugged and a rough place. But you, by coming here each year, not only soften our hearts, but you give us encouragement in the spirit of Barnabas to pursue the road ahead. Last week I was in 3 great global cities: Beijing, Berlin, and of course Brisbane. Today I'd like to share with you briefly a tale of 2 of those cities, and yes, briefly the third as well. Because each tells us something different and I believe consistent about the journey of faith across God's creation. In China today, by both official and unofficial accounts, there is an explosion of religious faith. In Islam, in Buddhism, in Confucianism, and, most spectacularly, in Christianity, where the estimates now reach into the hundreds of millions. This reflects the deepest spiritual longings of all humankind, where classical Marxism and modern materialism has failed in fulfilling the reason for life's purpose. And in the midst of today's tumult in much of the Muslim world, it reminds us afresh of the fundamental importance of religious freedom, tolerance and respect, particularly in countries where there is little. In Berlin, after speaking at a conference on China, I went out for a walk. In Germany, the home of Luther's Reformation almost 500 years ago, his church is dying. Many of the churches, as in much of Europe, are empty. They've become closed or become museums of what seems to be seen in mainstream Europe as monuments of a form of medieval exotica. That is, Christianity. It seems these treble assaults of science over faith, postmodernist relativism over universal truths and values, and an unprecedented wealth in the West beyond the wildest imaginings of all who have come before us, are now in the ascendant. But in one church, St. Matthew's in Potsdam Castle, the only building within miles that survived the Allied bombing, I was reminded of different stories still speaking eloquently to our modern age. It was here in November 1931, the year before Hitler came to power, that a young Lutheran pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer was ordained. Bonhoeffer, pastor, theologian, and Protestant martyr, speaks to us with searing conviction across the decades that it is impossible to sing hymns on Sunday while ignoring the plight of the Jews and the oppressed on Monday. His theology of Christ in the world, through his church giving voice to the voiceless, is hard for any person of conscience to resist. It commands us to act in the religious world, the social world, the economic world, the environmental world, and therefore the political world where power is exercised either for the few or for the many. And then to my home in Brisbane. The Australian church may be inspired by the church in China, but fears a future like the church in Europe. Although it remains for us, this community of faith, to chart our own course. It begins in our parishes, in our own local communities, where we can choose to be a light on a hill or hidden beneath a bushel. In our own local parish church, St. John the Baptist in Bulimba, we are seeking to embrace our local community, a community full of wealth, a community full of hardship. A small white wooden building, it has stood there for 120 years, and our parish council bravely has just negotiated a redevelopment of the site. After 5 years of deliberation. You know it well. The building is preserved, but the site is now open to coffee shops, community life, and the services the good people of this church offer to those in captivity. For our local church, our little local church, for it to survive and prosper, we must be authentic. And for those of you who come here each year to encourage us, who are members of this place, who come come from Australia's community of faith, we thank you. This can be a rugged and a rough place. But you, by coming here each year, not only soften our hearts, but you give us encouragement in the spirit of Barnabas to pursue the road ahead. Last week I was in 3 great global cities: Beijing, Berlin, and of course Brisbane. Today I'd like to share with you briefly a tale of 2 of those cities, and yes, briefly the third as well. Because each tells us something different, and I believe consistent, about the journey of faith across God's creation. In China today, by both official and unofficial accounts, there is an explosion of religious faith. In Islam, in Buddhism, in Confucianism, and, most spectacularly, in Christianity, where the estimates now reach into the hundreds of millions. This reflects the deepest spiritual longings of all humankind, where classical Marxism and modern materialism has failed in fulfilling the reason for life's purpose. And in the midst of today's tumult in much of the Muslim world, it reminds us afresh of the fundamental importance of religious freedom, tolerance and respect, particularly in countries where there is little. In Berlin, after speaking at a conference on China, I went out for a walk. In Germany, the home of Luther's Reformation almost 500 years ago, his church is dying. Many of the churches, as in much of Europe, are empty. They've become closed or become museums of what seems to be seen in mainstream Europe as monuments for a form of medieval exotica. That is, Christianity. It seems these treble assaults of science over faith, postmodernist relativism over universal truths and values, and an unprecedented wealth in the West beyond the wildest imaginings of all who have come before us, are now in the ascendant. But in one church, St Matthew's in Potsdam Castle, the only building within miles of the survived the Allied bombing, I was reminded of a different story, still speaking eloquently to our modern age. It was here in November of 1931, the year before Hitler came to power, that a young Lutheran pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer was ordained. Bonhoeffer, pastor, theologian, and Protestant martyr, speaks to us with searing conviction across the decades that it is impossible to sing hymns on Sunday while ignoring the plight of the Jews and the oppressed on Monday. His theology of Christ in the world, through his church giving voice to the voiceless, is hard for any person of conscience to resist. It commands us to act in